My name is Evan Caldwell, and for most of my life, 38 solid years, I believed I was the middle kid in the family of a worn-down factory worker just trying to get by. I was sure I knew my place in the world. The son who mailed money home without being asked, the brother who never missed a holiday meal, the guy who sat beside his mother and held her hand through 6 brutal months of chemotherapy. Then one rainy Tuesday in March, all of that certainty collapsed, and I learned that everything I believed about myself was false. My mother, Margaret, was lying in a bed at Cleveland General Hospital, her body finally giving up after months of cancer slowly eating her alive. Machines hummed and monitors chirped around her while my brother Lucas leaned against the window, glued to his phone, checking it every few minutes like he had somewhere better to be. My sister Elaine stayed planted in a chair near the wall, calmly filing her nails, acting like this was no different from any other weekday afternoon. They'd never been quite like me. Tougher, colder, less sentimental, but I always assumed that was just how families worked. Then Margaret's eyes flew open, sharper and clearer than they'd been in weeks. Her hand, thin and icy like a bird's skeleton, clamped around my wrist with a strength that caught me completely off guard. She dragged me closer, so close I could smell the harsh mix of antiseptic and decay on her breath. "Evan," she whispered, her voice brittle and dry, like leaves snapping underfoot. "I have to tell you something before I die." She told me I wasn't her son. At first, I figured the morphine was messing with her mind. I tried to pull away and reach for the call button, but her fingers tightened even more. "Listen to me," she said, louder this time, loud enough that Lucas finally looked up from his phone and Elaine froze mid-file. "I took you from a billionaire's family in 1985. Your real name is Julian Whitaker." She said my father owned half of Manhattan. The room went dead quiet except for the heart monitor, which suddenly started screaming faster. Margaret's eyes rolled back, her hand slipped from mine, and less than 20 minutes later, she was gone. The final thing my mother ever said to me was a confession that shattered my entire identity. Lucas reacted first. In 3 long strides, he crossed the room and slammed me against the wall. "I always knew something was off about you," he snarled, his grease-stained mechanic's hand smearing dirt across my collar. 38 years pretending to be our brother, and you didn't even know." Elaine slowly stood up, her grocery store name tag still clipped to her shirt from her shift that morning. "Now it makes sense," she said flatly. "Mom never loved you. That wasn't love, it was guilt. Pure guilt." They had me removed from the hospital before Margaret's body had even cooled. Lucas yanked my wallet out of my pocket and took the $300 I'd brought to help pay for the funeral. "Call it rent for freeloading for 38 years, he said with a laugh as security dragged me toward the door. Good riddance to fake family. For the next 3 months, I lived at the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter, grabbing day labor whenever someone would hire me and trying to wrap my head around the fact that my entire life started with a kidnapping. I had no ID, no family, no proof I existed at all. Evan Caldwell was just the name of a stolen child raised by a thief. Julian Whitaker was a missing person who'd vanished nearly 40 years earlier. Then yesterday afternoon, while I was standing in line for food at the shelter, 2 men in tailored suits approached me. One of them, Daniel Hawthorne, said he was a private investigator. The other, Marcus Corville, introduced himself as an estate attorney. They told me they'd been looking for me ever since my mother's deathbed confession made a brief appearance in the local newspaper. "Your biological father is Sterling Whitaker," Hawthorne said, showing me DNA results pulled from a coffee cup I'd tossed in the trash. He explained that the man owned 43 commercial buildings in Manhattan, worth around $2.4 billion. "He's been searching for you since 1985, he added. "He never accepted that you were dead." Corville opened his briefcase and slid a document toward me. It was a will, and the only name on it, my real name, Julian Sterling Whitaker Whitaker III, was listed as the sole heir. "Your father is dying," he said quietly. "He has maybe 2 weeks left, and he wants to see his son before it's over." Then Hawthorne leaned in and spoke 7 words that made my stomach drop and my blood turn cold. Words that somehow explained everything and nothing at the same time. Margaret Caldwell was Sterling's biological sister. The woman who stole me hadn't been some desperate stranger. She was my aunt, my father's own sister, who raised me as her child while watching her brother build the empire she believed should have belonged to her. The family I thought I'd lost had never truly been mine. The family I never knew had been searching for me my entire life. And the woman I called mom had engineered a lie so cruel it stretched across 38 years and ruined more than one life. I stood there in that shelter, wearing the same clothes I'd slept in for 3 days, holding paperwork that said I was worth billions, realizing my existence was a lie layered inside a crime, wrapped in a betrayal that went back generations. The rain that began falling the day Margaret died was still coming down, and in that moment, it felt like it might never stop. Growing up in Cleveland's industrial district meant factory whistles instead of birds in the morning, air that tasted like metal, and watching your parents grow old twice as fast as everyone else. Our duplex on Stockton Avenue sat wedged between two abandoned warehouses, the kind of street where delivery drivers locked their doors and pizza places refused to come after dark. Still, it was home, and for nearly 4 decades, I thought I understood what that word meant. My father, Thomas Caldwell, was built like a refrigerator, 6'3", thick as a wall, with hands strong enough to palm a basketball or break loose a bolt that hadn't moved in decades. He worked double shifts at the Cleveland steel processing plant and came home after midnight coated in a layer of metallic dust that never fully washed away. "Hard work makes an honest man," he'd tell me, messing up my hair with those massive hands. "Don't forget that, Evan. We might not have much, but everything we've got, we earned." Thomas died when I was 15 years old. A crane cable snapped during what was supposed to be a routine lift, and a steel beam weighing over 2 tons came crashing down the wrong way. The company mailed us a check for $20,000 along with a neatly typed letter explaining that they accepted no responsibility for what happened. Margaret aged 10 years in a single night. Her brown hair turned gray at the temples, and her shoulders curled forward permanently as she sat at our kitchen table, staring at numbers and trying to figure out how to stretch that money and Thomas's pitiful life insurance far enough to raise 3 kids by herself. Lucas was 18 then, already working part-time at Kowalski's auto repair shop. He had Thomas's thick build and Thomas's temper too, quick to explode and slow to let anything go. He quit high school the day after the funeral. "Man of the house now," he announced, even though all that really meant was drinking Thomas's leftover Budweiser and yelling at me for reading too much. "Books don't put food on the table, college boy," he'd sneer, even though I'd never once talked about going to college. For kids like us, college wasn't even a possibility. Elaine was 12 at the time, all elbows, knobby knees, and attitude, already learning that the world didn't hand out favors. She'd quietly count the cash in Margaret's purse when she thought no one was watching, doing the math on what we could afford to eat that night. By 14, she was working under the table at Petrosky's Market, bagging groceries and lying about her age so convincingly that even I sometimes forgot she wasn't actually 16. But from the start, I stood apart, and everyone could see it. Lucas and Elaine had Thomas's dark brown eyes and heavy features. I had green eyes. Ones Margaret said came from somewhere deep in the family tree. My hair was lighter, my frame thinner. Numbers made sense to me in a way they didn't for Lucas. I could add figures in my head faster than he could punch them into a calculator. When the electric company screwed up our bill, I was the one who caught it. That mistake saved us $80 we didn't have to spare. "Evan's the smart one," Margaret would say, but she never looked me in the eye when she said it. Instead, she'd stare just past my shoulder, like she was seeing someone else standing there instead of me. After she'd had wine, which started happening more often after Thomas died, she'd sometimes cup my face with shaky hands. "You look just like," she'd begin, then stop herself. "Like your grandfather, my father. He had those same eyes." Without anyone officially saying it, I became the family accountant. Every Sunday, I sat at our scratched-up kitchen table with Margaret's checkbook, deciding which bills had to be paid immediately and which ones could wait. I called creditors and made promises I wasn't sure we could keep. Lucas hated it. He said I was acting better than everyone else. Elaine called me Mom's favorite, but there was nothing warm about the way Margaret treated me. If anything, she kept a careful distance, like I was something fragile she was afraid to touch too hard. After high school, I took a job at Thurman Distribution Center and worked my way up from loader to warehouse supervisor over the next 15 years. The pay wasn't impressive, but it was reliable. Every month, I sent $500 home. Margaret accepted it with that same distant expression. "You're a good son," she'd say, the words sounding practiced. like lines she'd repeated so many times they'd lost their meaning. When Margaret was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, it hit like a sudden storm with no warning. I was the one who took time off work to drive her to appointments. Lucas said he couldn't leave the shop. Elaine had just been promoted to shift manager at the grocery store and said she couldn't risk losing the position. So I sat in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and quiet terror, holding Margaret's hand while poison dripped into her veins, praying it would kill the cancer before it killed her. The morning she died, we gathered at Cleveland General after the doctors said it wouldn't be long. Lucas complained about missing work. Elaine scrolled through her phone, occasionally glancing up to ask how much longer this was going to take. I sat beside Margaret's bed, watching her chest rise and fall, wondering why it felt like I was losing someone I'd never truly known. Looking back, I realized that feeling was dead on. I never really knew Margaret Caldwell, and she made sure I never knew myself either. Her confession shattered that hospital room like a brick through glass. As the heart monitor flattened out and nurses rushed in, Lucas grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. "What did she just say?" he demanded, his face flushed, the veins in his neck bulging the way they did when he was drunk and ready to fight. "Did she just say you're not her son?" The medical staff shoved us into the hallway while they worked on Margaret, but we all knew it was already over. Elaine pressed herself against the wall, staring at me like she'd never seen my face before. "She stole you?" she asked. "From a billionaire? What the hell is she talking about?" Lucas slammed me into a vending machine. "I knew it," he growled. "I always knew something was off about you. The way you talked, the way you acted, all superior with your numbers and your clean hands. You were never one of us." "Lucas, I didn't know," I said, my head spinning as I tried to process everything Margaret had said. "How could I have known?" "Sterling Whitaker," Elaine said suddenly, already typing on her phone. "Holy shit, Lucas, look at this. He owns half of Manhattan. His company's worth billions." She lifted her eyes to me, ice cold. "It says here his son was kidnapped in 1985 and never found." She didn't hesitate. "That's you. You're the stolen baby." A doctor stepped out to officially pronounce Margaret dead, but Lucas and Elaine barely noticed. Their attention had locked onto me. They circled closer, like predators who'd finally identified prey. 38 years, Lucas said, his voice rising. 38 years of mom feeding you, clothing you, putting a roof over your head, and you weren't even hers. "She was my mother," I said. "She raised me. I'm still your brother." "Brother?" Elaine laughed, but there wasn't an ounce of humor in it. "You're not our anything. You're just some rich man's stolen kid. You really think you belong here?" Lucas snapped. "You think you have any right to anything that's ours?" We somehow ended up in the hospital parking lot, Lucas shoving me forward while Elaine trailed behind, still glued to her phone. "It says here Sterling Whitaker never stopped searching," she said aloud. "He poured millions into finding his son. There's an entire foundation built around it." She finally looked up at me, her face twisted with disgust. "While we were eating boxed mac and cheese 4 nights a week, your real daddy was living in a penthouse." Lucas reached into my jacket and ripped out my wallet. "That money's for Mom's funeral," I said, lunging for it. "Mom?" he laughed, slipping the $300 into his pocket. "She wasn't your mother, remember?" He tossed my empty wallet onto the asphalt. "Consider it rent for all those years you freeloaded." "Lucas." "Elaine, please," I said, my voice breaking. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Not our problem," Elaine replied. She was already on the phone. I heard her say my name, my address, and then the word fraud. "Yeah, he's been living under false pretenses. The real Evan Caldwell probably died years ago. This guy's just some kidnapped rich kid." Security showed up before I could say another word. Lucas told them I was harassing them and had no legal connection to the deceased. "Check the records," he said calmly. "Margaret Caldwell had 2 children, Lucas and Elaine. This man is a stranger committing fraud." They escorted me out. When I tried to head toward my car, Lucas held up my keys. "You've been driving Thomas's truck," he said. "Thomas Caldwell was my father, not yours. The truck stays with family." I walked 4 miles back to my apartment, my head spinning through memories that suddenly lined up too neatly. Margaret's guilty looks, the way she tensed whenever I excelled at math, how she always avoided talking about my early childhood, claiming we couldn't afford film for pictures. My landlord was waiting outside my door with a locksmith. "Mr. Liu called," he said, avoiding my eyes. Mr. Liu was Lucas and Elaine's cousin, a lawyer who handled small claims. There's a question about your identity. Can't have someone living here under false pretenses. You've got 10 minutes to pack what you can carry. 10 minutes to pack 38 years of a life that was never really mine. I grabbed clothes, a watch that belonged to a man who wasn't truly my father, and a photo of Margaret I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. Lucas had already contacted my bank, reporting suspicious activity on an account he claimed Margaret opened under a false name. They froze everything pending investigation. By nightfall, I was standing outside the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter with 2 garbage bags and no idea who I actually was. Evan Caldwell was gone. Maybe he never existed at all. Julian Whitaker was a ghost, a missing child from a world I couldn't even picture. And I was trapped somewhere in between, a man without a name, without a family, without a single piece of proof that I mattered. 3 months at the Burke Lakefront shelter taught me that rock bottom has levels, and nobody talks about what's below the lowest one. I went from warehouse supervisor to day laborer when I could find work, hauling furniture for cash, cleaning out foreclosed homes, anything that didn't require paperwork. My hands hardened, cracked, and split. I learned which convenience stores threw away edible food, which churches served meals without sermons, and which corners could get you hurt after dark. Thursday afternoon started like every other. I stood in the shelter's food line, holding a plastic tray scrubbed so many times it would never look clean again. The man ahead of me was arguing over portion sizes. The woman behind me smelled like cheap vodka. I kept my head down. Invisibility was survival. Evan Caldwell. 2 men in suits that cost more than I used to make in a month stood beside me. The entire line froze. Men dressed like that didn't show up at Burke Lakefront unless someone was dead or someone was getting arrested. "I'm Daniel Hawthorne," the older one said, handing me a business card that read private investigator with a Manhattan address. "This is Marcus Corville, an estate attorney. We've been looking for you for 3 months. If this is about Lucas claiming I owe him money," I said, still gripping my tray, "there's nothing left to take." "It's about your father," Corville said. "Your biological father, Sterling Whitaker." The name hit me like ice water. I set the tray down before my hands gave out. "How did you find me?" I asked. Hawthorne lifted a clear evidence bag with a coffee cup inside. "DNA. From the cup you tossed yesterday at the convenience store on Euclid Avenue. We've been checking shelters, hospitals, churches. Your mother's confession made the local paper. Small item, page 6, but Sterling has people watching for anything connected to the kidnapping." "Come with us," Corville said. "There's a conference room at the Marriott downtown. We need privacy." I glanced down at my stained, overused clothes. "I'm not exactly dressed for the Marriott." "Mr. Whitaker," Hawthorne said, and hearing that name tightened my chest. "You could be wearing a garbage bag and you'd still be Sterling Whitaker's son." The conference room overlooked Lake Erie through floor-to-ceiling windows. Corville opened a leather briefcase and spread documents across the polished table. Birth certificates, DNA results, photographs that made my hands tremble. The photos showed a baby with green eyes, the same green the first saw staring back at me every morning in the mirror. There was another picture of a young couple holding that baby. The woman had my exact hair color, and the man shared my jawline so perfectly it made my throat tighten. "Your father is Sterling Whitaker," Hawthorne said, sliding a more recent photo across the table. It showed an elderly man lying in a hospital bed. Even weakened by illness, there was no mistaking the authority in his face. Hawthorne explained that he owned Whitaker Real Estate Holdings, 43 commercial properties in Manhattan, including 2 full blocks in Midtown. The portfolio was valued at roughly $2.4 billion. "Your mother was Evelyn Whitaker, née Hayes," Corville added, placing another photo in front of me. "She was beautiful, her green eyes alive with warmth. She was killed in a car accident in 1988. Sterling never remarried. He never had other children. Corville told me losing both his wife and son broke something inside him that never healed." Margaret Caldwell worked as a housekeeper for the Whitaker family in 1985, Hawthorne continued. "She'd been told she couldn't have children after multiple miscarriages. On October 15th, during a charity gala at the estate, she took you from your nursery." He said she had planned it for months, fake paperwork ready, a car waiting. "She drove straight through the night to Ohio, to a cousin who helped her build a new identity. Your father never believed you were dead, Corville said. Law enforcement eventually gave up. Sterling didn't. He kept private investigators on the case for 38 years. Hawthorne added that my father had spent close to $12 million searching for me. I stared at the documents spread across the table, each one rewriting the story of my life. Why now? I asked. Why could you find me when nobody else could? Your mother's deathbed confession, Hawthorne replied. We monitor news feeds for keywords tied to the case. When Margaret's name appeared alongside a confession about a kidnapped baby from 1985, we moved immediately. Your DNA confirmed everything. Your father is dying, Corville said gently. Stage 4 liver cancer. The doctors are giving him 2 weeks, maybe less. He wants to see his son before he goes. He slid one final document across the table, thick and heavy. This is his will. You are the sole beneficiary. Everything goes to Julian Sterling Whitaker III. That's you. I don't know anything about real estate, I said. I ran a warehouse. I've been homeless for 3 months. You've got the wrong guy. We have exactly the right one, Hawthorne said. But there's something else you need to know about Margaret Caldwell. Something we uncovered while digging into her past. Something that explains everything. The private jet landed at Teterboro Airport as the sun dipped behind Manhattan. Through the window, I could see the skyline. Those massive towers of glass and steel Sterling Whitaker had helped shape. Hawthorne bought me a suit from the hotel gift shop. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean and fit properly. I felt like a fraud wearing it, like a homeless man pretending to be someone else, which, in a way, I still was. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a Fifth Avenue building overlooking Central Park. The elevator opened straight into the foyer, where marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. A nurse in spotless scrubs greeted us. He's been asking for you every hour, she said quietly. He's lucid right now, but we don't know for how long. Sterling Whitaker lay in a hospital bed set up in what had once been his study. Outside the windows, Manhattan sparkled like a constellation he'd pulled from the sky. He was smaller than I expected, cancer having stripped away what must once have been a powerful frame. But his eyes, when they met mine, were sharp and piercing. Julian, he whispered, tears tracing lines down his hollow cheeks. You have Evelyn's eyes. I've seen them in my dreams for 38 years. I moved closer, unsure whether to touch him, unsure what to call him. He reached out first, his fingers thin but his grip strong. Let me look at you, he said. My son, my boy. They told me you were dead, but I knew. A father knows. We talked for an hour. He asked about my life, flinching as I described the poverty, the struggle, and Lucas and Elaine's cruelty. I failed you, he kept saying. I was supposed to protect you, and I failed. You couldn't have known, I told him. Margaret fooled everyone. Something shifted in his expression then. He turned to Hawthorne. Tell him, he said. He deserves to know everything. Hawthorne pulled out a folder he'd been holding back. When we investigated Margaret's background, we discovered something unexpected. He paused. Margaret's maiden name wasn't Wilson, as she claimed on her employment records. It was Whitaker. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of medical equipment. I looked at Sterling as his face collapsed under a fresh wave of grief. She was my sister, he said quietly. My half-sister. My father's shame. Hawthorne explained that Sterling's father, my grandfather, had an affair with a housekeeper in 1955. Margaret was the result. The family paid the woman to disappear and never contact them again. But Margaret learned the truth after her mother died. Hawthorne continued. She came looking for money when she turned 18. My father gave her $50,000 to go away, Sterling said bitterly. Made her sign papers promising never to contact the family again. But she wanted more than money, Corville added. She wanted recognition. She wanted to be a Whitaker. So she came back under a false name, Hawthorne said. Got hired as a housekeeper with forged references. She worked in your home for 2 years, watching you build a life with Evelyn, watching you have everything she believed should have been hers. There's more, Hawthorne said, pulling out a worn leather journal. We found this in Margaret's apartment in Cleveland. She kept detailed records. He opened it to a marked page. The handwriting was tight, angry, and full of resentment. Sterling has everything, she'd written, because he was born on the right side of the sheets. The journal went on. His son will inherit billions while my children get nothing. But if I take the boy and raise him myself, the money will still come, just through me. I'll be his mother. I'll be the one he loves. And the money will finally end up where it belongs. She didn't just steal you from a billionaire, Sterling said, tightening his grip on my hand. She stole you from her own brother. She raised my son while watching from the sidelines as I built my empire, knowing every day that she was keeping my greatest treasure from me. But Thomas, I said, struggling to piece it together. Lucas and Elaine, were they? Thomas's children were from a previous marriage, Hawthorne confirmed. Margaret couldn't have children, just like she always claimed. Lucas and Elaine were Thomas's kids, not hers. She married him partly because he already had a family, Sterling added. It made hiding you easier. He started coughing then, hard enough that flecks of blood appeared on his lips. A nurse rushed forward, but Sterling waved her away. 2 more things, he rasped. First, I've already signed everything over to you. As of this moment, you're worth $2 billion. Corville has all the paperwork. Then he pulled me closer, close enough that I could smell the medicine and the unmistakable scent of death. Second, Margaret wrote something else in that journal. She said there were others. Other housekeepers. Other stolen children. She wasn't acting alone. His eyes locked onto mine. Find them, Julian. Find them and bring them home. He died 2 weeks later, still holding my hand, whispering Evelyn's name. At his funeral, surrounded by New York's elite, Lucas and Elaine appeared in poorly fitted formal clothes, uncomfortable in a world they'd never belonged to. Lucas tried first. Brother, he said, stepping toward me at the reception. My security team moved immediately, but I stopped them with a raised hand. I'm not your brother, I said calmly. I never was. Margaret made sure of that. You can't just leave us with nothing, Elaine said, her voice slipping into something desperate. We raised you. We're family. You threw me out of a hospital and left me homeless. I reminded her. You took my last $300 and called me a bastard. Good riddance, if I remember correctly. 6 months later, I stood in the office that had once been Sterling's, watching snow fall over the Manhattan skyline. The city that once felt like another planet now had my name etched onto 3 buildings. The leather chair still smelled faintly of his cologne, and sometimes I caught myself turning to ask him something before remembering he was gone. The first thing I did with the money was write 2 checks, $50,000 each. One for Lucas, one for Elaine. My lawyers thought I'd lost my mind. They have no legal claim, Corville reminded me. They treated you terribly. This isn't about them, I said as I signed the checks. It's about who I decide to be. Lucas cashed his immediately. Elaine mailed hers back, shredded into confetti, along with a note that read, I hope you choke on your billions. I had it framed. It hangs in my private bathroom, a daily reminder that money doesn't cure bitterness, it just magnifies whatever was already there. Exactly 6 months after 2 men in suits found me in the Burke Lakefront Shelter's food line, the shelter received an anonymous $10 million donation. I delivered it myself, wearing the same kind of clothes I'd worn when I lived there. Mrs. Fairmont, the director who'd slipped me extra blankets on freezing nights, recognized me instantly. Evan, she said, then stopped. I'm sorry. I heard about everything. Julian, right? Evan's fine, I told her. Evan was the man you helped when he had nothing. Julian's just the name on the checks. She broke down when she saw the amount. This will keep us open for 20 years, she said. We can expand. Mental health services. Job training. Good, I said, because I'm going to need your help with something bigger. The Evelyn Whitaker Foundation launched 3 months later with a $100 million endowment. Our mission was simple and overwhelming. Find the other stolen children Margaret's journals hinted at. Hawthorne, now the foundation's director, presented the findings at our first board meeting. Between 1980 and 1990, 17 wealthy families reported kidnapped infants who were never recovered. In 12 cases, a housekeeper or nanny quit or disappeared shortly afterward. Margaret's journals mentioned 3 other women by first name only, Rachel, Claire, and Natalie. We believe they were working together. 8 months later, we found the first one. A man in Detroit named Andrew Cole learned he was actually Andrew Pearson, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. Rachel, his kidnapper, had died 5 years earlier, taking the truth with her. We reunited him with his biological father, who'd spent 35 years believing his son drowned during a botched kidnapping. The second case was harder. Claire had raised her daughter, Laura, in deep poverty in rural Kentucky while Laura's real parents searched the world for her. Their reunion played out across every major news network, Laura clinging to parents she'd never known while trying to process a lifetime built on lies. But the third case nearly broke me. Natalie hadn't stolen just one baby. She'd taken twins, separating them. She sold one to a desperate couple in Canada and raised the other as her own in Phoenix. Those twins were 29 years old when we finally located them. They'd spent their entire lives about 300 miles apart, each carrying the same quiet feeling that something was missing. Neither of them knew the other existed, yet both had been searching for the same unanswered questions. Lucas tried to sue me 14 months after Sterling died. He claimed emotional distress and demanded $50 million for the pain Margaret's deception had caused him. The judge dismissed the case in minutes. After that, Lucas started sending letters, first angry, then desperate, swinging back and forth between threats and pleading, until Corville stepped in and secured a restraining order. Elaine disappeared completely. I later heard she'd married someone in Florida and told people her brother was dead. I kept Margaret's photograph, the one I grabbed from my apartment on that awful day, not because I missed her and not out of affection, but as a reminder. She took me from my real family. She robbed Sterling of the chance to raise his son. She denied me the chance to know my mother before she died. But in her attempt to steal wealth for herself, she also gave me something she never intended to. By forcing me to grow up without money, Margaret taught me what it truly means to have nothing. Every decision I make now, every donation, every investment in finding stolen children, comes from having lived on both sides of that divide. I've been homeless and a billionaire. I've been nobody and somebody. I've been Evan Caldwell and Julian Whitaker, standing alone in that penthouse office, watching snow fall on the city Sterling built and I inherited. I finally understood what Margaret never did. Family isn't defined by blood, money, or the name printed on your birth certificate. It's about choosing love when hate would be easier, choosing to build instead of destroy, and choosing truth even when lies feel safer. So far, the Whitaker Foundation has helped locate 43 stolen children. Some reunions are filled with joy. Others are messy, painful, and complicated. All of them matter. Each one is a small repair to a massive injustice, a family pieced back together from the wreckage of someone else's greed. Sterling searched for me for 38 years and found me just in time to say goodbye. Now I search for others, hoping they get more time than we did. Sometimes I dream about Margaret. In those dreams, I ask her if it was worth it. Did stealing me give her the satisfaction she wanted? Did raising her brother's son fill the emptiness where recognition should have been? She never answers. She only looks at me with those guilty eyes. Eyes I now understand weren't seeing her stolen child, but her brother's face staring back at her every day, a living reminder of what she'd done. The 7 words that changed everything still echo in my mind. Margaret Caldwell was Sterling's biological sister. 7 words that exposed a lifetime of lies. 7 words that showed how greed can rot even family bonds. 7 words that proved blood alone doesn't make you family, but it can make you a monster. My name is Julian Sterling Whitaker III. I was stolen as a baby by my aunt, raised in poverty while my father searched the world for me, and found just in time to watch him die. But I'm also Evan Caldwell, the warehouse worker who held his dying mother's hand even as she confessed to destroying multiple lives. I'm both, and I'm neither. Rich and poor. Found, and still a little lost. The money Sterling left me isn't truly mine. It belongs to every stolen child still waiting to be found, every family broken by greed, every parent who never stopped searching. I'm just the caretaker of resources that can bring people home. Margaret stole me to claim a fortune that was never hers. I used that same fortune to undo crimes like hers, one recovered child at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that makes the 38 stolen years mean something after all. If this story touched you, or reminded you that family isn't always what it seems, take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most powerful transformations. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that prove life is stranger and more meaningful than fiction. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story that might change how you see the world. Thanks for listening. And remember, Sometimes the family that searches for you for decades is worth more than the family that raised you on lies.